Welcome to our continuing series of virtual voices focusing on the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Thank you for your letters. We answered them as much as we can. Our speakers today are Dr. Najmedin Meshkati, who is a professor of civil, environmental, industrial, and system engineering and of international relations at the University of Southern California. He is also an associate with a project on managing the atom at the Belfer Center for Science and International Affairs at Harvard University, Kennedy School. He was previously a senior science and engineering advisor to the Secretary of State of the US State Department. Mrs. Katerina Pavlova works for the State Agency of Ukraine on exclusion zone management as the head of the Department of International Cooperations and Public Relations. She is also the acting head of the State Agency for the Chernobyl Exclusion Zone Management and an member of the expert group at Columbia University. Before I turn over the speaker to our presenters, I wanted to mention to you that we still, or the world still does not have a viable alternative for nuclear energy to provide the energy that the world needs. Current alternate sources, solar, wind, gas, is not sufficient, and we have problems with toxic waste in solar panels particularly, and the destruction of our groundwater. We need to resolve the fear factor created by exaggerated facts following Chernobyl and move toward building small nuclear power stations that will not only give us the energy we need, but will be significantly less expensive for all of the consumers. Now, over to you, Professor Meshkati.
Good morning, good evening, good night, depends on where you are. I am Najmedin. I'm very pleased and it's a pleasure to be here with the World Information Transfer session. And thank you very much, Dr. Durbach. It's really a pleasure to see you and Fred and Katerina and Arya. I would like to start my presentation by following up Dr. Durbach's excellent opening remarks about the need for nuclear energy to be taken into account as a major player in the energy baskets for many countries. As you have seen what happened in Texas a few months ago, that the issue of the stability of the energy source and the base load is very important. Of course, renewables are very nice and we need to continue research on them and implement that, but getting the base load at the level of both availability and reliability is an issue that nuclear could provide. The biggest stumbling block for nuclear, as you all may know, and you know, is the issue of nuclear safety and the issue of the repository of the nuclear waste. And we need to still continue working on these two things, nuclear safety and safe repository for nuclear waste. This is my title slide. I would like to talk about Chernobyl at 35 and Fukushima at 10. And the subtitle I chose, the third time will not be a charm either. That's an American metaphor. Because these two major events, they were catastrophic. And I hope that we learn lessons from these two in order to be able to prevent the third one. And I hope that I would not see another nuclear accident at the magnitude of Chernobyl and Fukushima in my own lifetime, and neither do you. I am maybe one of the very few people that have been to both of these stricken reactor sites in both Chernobyl and Fukushima. You will see some photos of that. And basically visiting Chernobyl and visiting Fukushima and conducting research on nuclear safety for the last 42 or 3 years. I started my work about the 3 Mile Island nuclear accident in the United States in March 28, 1979. I have been in this business, as you see, for almost 42 years. This is really, visiting Chernobyl and Fukushima inspired me to say that we need to be always thinking about unthinkable. And this is one message that I would like to mention to you, because this is really very important for all of us. I have been in many nuclear plants, visited many nuclear plants all around the world. I have listed them here. And then these are the ones that I personally visited around the world. And the one that you see on the bottom are the one that I studied or conducted research with my students and have written about that. And of course, as you see over here, Chernobyl in Ukraine and Fukushima Daiichi and Daini over here are very prominent. And of course, some other nuclear plants in Mexico, in Armenia, in United States, and several more of them. Again, I'm not a armchair general or basically just a commentator. I have been there, I have seen that, and that. This is my visit of Chernobyl in I think May 1997. It was 11 years after the accident. And this is, you see the old sarcophagus, which is now under a new shelter. And you may have seen the photos of that. And Mr. Grossi and President of Ukraine visited this new shelter 2 days ago on the 35th anniversary of that. I have been there. I spent 2 or 3 days in that nuclear plant. This is that hallway going from control, from the administrative side to the reactor control room. This is the reactor number, at that time, reactor number 3, which was operational. And I visited there, spent 2 days over there. Again, I studied Chernobyl. I have written about Chernobyl for a long time. And this is Fukushima Daiichi. This is yours truly in the Fukushima Daiichi control room. And this is me with the face mask and Tyvek and that. This is the control room of the Fukushima, one of the 3 stricken reactors in Fukushima Daiichi. I have been a member of the US National Academy of Sciences that conducted research and visited Fukushima Daiichi and Daini, and we came up with this book, which is available. I will refer to that. This is one of the books of our investigation. Basically, the title of our study for the National Academy of Sciences was Lessons Learned from Fukushima Accident for US Nuclear Plant Safety and Security. Of course, there are many other books written about Fukushima. I have several of them over here in my home. There is this one, and then there is this one, Station Blackout. And this one, Meltdown, is the one that just came out very recently. This is a good one, by the way. All of these are good, but this one is very new. Okay. What I would like to talk with you today is basically common and universally applicable lesson from Fukushima and Chernobyl for us as we move forward. Because we need nuclear energy, we need to utilize that. There may be more reactors being built, both large and then this SMR, small modular reactor. But these 2 lessons, or these lessons that we learn from maybe from 3 Mile Island and Chernobyl and Fukushima, we need to remember that. I would like to focus these common and universally applicable lessons for you very briefly, because I have only 20 minutes or so to speak, so to hand to my distinguished colleague, Ms. Katerina. I had an article co-written for when I was on sabbatical at Harvard Belfer Center for Science and International Affairs, managing the atom program, on the 33rd anniversary of Chernobyl. This article is called 33 years since the catastrophe at Chernobyl, a universal lesson for global nuclear power. This is available on the web. You can just Google my name, Meshkati, Chernobyl, and it comes up. My co-author over here is Professor Sergei Polokhy. He's a professor at Harvard, director of Ukrainian Center, and he is the author of a book on Chernobyl. And I strongly recommend you to read this article if you're interested, and more importantly, to read his research book on Chernobyl, which is one of the, in my judgment, one of the seminal books written about Chernobyl, and I strongly recommend you to look at that. Again, a lot of the points that I make here today is very brief, but you can get some a little bit more depth about Chernobyl over here and the universality of its lesson. The other, one of my recent articles is this one that is about the 10th anniversary of Fukushima. It is published in Conversation, which is a global publication. It's been translated into Catalan, Spanish, and many other languages, and also in Vietnam and other places. The title of this article is 10 years after Fukushima, Safety's Still Nuclear Power Greatest Challenge. I'm honored that my co-author on this article, which has been very, very received around the world. I'm very honored by that. The co-author is Dr. Kiyoshi Kurokawa. Dr. Kurokawa was the chairman of the Japan Parliament Independent National Commission that investigated Fukushima. Again, I would strongly recommend you to read this article because it looks again the commonalities between Chernobyl and Fukushima, and there's lessons learned from that. And again, you can easily find that by go to Google, type my name, maybe Meshkati, Chernobyl, Fukushima, and it pops out in several languages. Again, my honor was to be with Dr. Kurokawa, who is a very, very renowned and respected statesman in Japan. What I would like to talk with you in the balance of my time is basically my premise based on my experience that in safety and reliability of complex technological system, nuclear plant are one of the best example of that. We have to consider safety culture and human factors issues. And these are the cross-cutting and common issues. That's what I would like to concentrate on, the importance of safety culture. In the balance of my talk, the human factors are also equally important, as we saw in 3 Mile Island, as we saw that in Chernobyl and Fukushima. And of course, that is more detailed then I can get into that, but the safety culture, I just want to concentrate on that. And those 2 articles that I showed you, that goes more to the depth on that. Just for some of you that's maybe a little bit unfamiliar with this term safety culture, I made an analogy of safety culture, which I think fits beautifully with this time of the pandemic that we have. And my analogy is the following, that safety culture, or a healthy safety culture for a nuclear power plant, is just like a healthy, strong immune system. A strong immune system in human body will fend off against diseases and pathogen. It will basically protects you against pathogen and diseases and that. And this is what a good, healthy safety culture will do with a technological system. If we have a weak or unhealthy safety culture, our system is vulnerable to incident and accidents. Please remember that analogy. And that's what they say in the age of this time of the pandemic, and that what vaccines provide us, it will really increase our immune system, and it basically trains our immune system to fend off against coronavirus. That's basically what a good safety culture, healthy safety culture can do. And of course, you can improve your safety culture, and we need to work on that. Just want to share with some statement with you about Chernobyl and about Fukushima, so that you know that why I concentrate on safety culture as a main root cause, not the, as a main root cause of the Chernobyl accident. Of course, there have been many other causes, but this a main root cause. There could be a few other main root causes also. This was based on a statement which is very famous by the International Atomic Energy Agency. It's long, but it basically says the Chernobyl accident can be said to have followed from the deficient safety culture, not only at Chernobyl plant, but throughout the Soviet nuclear power system. This was a very strong statement because it was made by the International Multilateral Organization, which is International Atomic Energy Agency, in a seminal document which stands for International Nuclear Safety Advisory Group, INSAC. And remember the importance of this statement. It came out when the Soviet Union was still in power, when INSAC 1 came out. INSAC 1 appeared in 1986-87. And this is one of the very first places that you see a reference to this term safety culture, and later on you see more of that. And this was again from another report that from INSAC 1 that they said that the root cause of Chernobyl accident is in the human element, and this human element and safety culture is important for all reactors. And there were other statements by IAEA. Again, this is another statement that you see that from Nuclear Safety Review. And then this is one of the statements that I really like, and I printed that and I framed that on the wall of my office at the University of Southern California. This is by the late Valery Legazov, who was the physicist and the first deputy director of the Khrushchev Institute. And he went and investigated Chernobyl. Those of you that have seen the HBO miniseries, as you see that Valery Legazov was the main character of that. And this is statement, I advocate the respect for human engineering, which means the same thing as human factors, and human machine interaction is very important, and I try to impart that in my students at USC and elsewhere. Now let's look at Fukushima accident. Then I think I have established with this brief thing about the importance of safety culture and human factors in Chernobyl. Now let's look at the Fukushima. In the case of Fukushima, many people, they say, oh, it was a earthquake, then triggered tsunami 45 minutes later, and that inundated plant. It was a natural disaster. However, many studies, including the one that I'm going to show it to you, said this natural disaster was the initiator, but it triggered a series of events that perpetuated and propagated through the system, and those events that was triggered by that, they were all anthropogenic or man-made. In that case, yes, it started with a natural disaster, but the rest of that could have been prevented because of the man-made version, the nature of that. This is the copy of that National Diet Report, the one that I mentioned to you. It's called the Fukushima Nuclear Accident Investigation Commission. This is the most seminal report that came out from Japan. And this is Dr. Kiyoshi Kurokawa, my co-author in our recent article, who was the chairman of this independent commission, which was created by Japanese parliament. If you see in this preface that he has written for the report, which I will show it to you, there were many places that I underlined or are circled. These are places that he talks about mindset, about culture, and other things. And this is basically some excerpts from Professor Kurikawa's statement. One place he says that accident at Fukushima Daiichi power plant cannot be regarded as a natural disaster. It was profoundly man-made disaster that could and should have been foreseen and prevented. I think this is a very strong statement coming from a national commission in Japan and by the chairman of that. And then he says, this was a disaster made in Japan. Why he says that? Because of the structure of the regulatory regime and the culture of the utility, which was TEPCO, Tokyo Electric Power Company. Again, for some of you that may be just recently exposed to this, this may sound a little bit strange. That's why I urge you for further information, look at the his National Commission report, or maybe just a recent article that I showed that to you that was published last month on the 10th anniversary of Fukushima. He continues in that National Commission by saying that Japan industry managed to avoid absorbing critical lessons from 3 Mile Island and Chernobyl. 3 Mile Island, as I mentioned to you, it was a nuclear accident in the United States on March 28, 1979, that had a meltdown, but the radiation was not released to the environment like Chernobyl or Fukushima. It stayed within the containment building, but it was a major disaster in terms of its impact on the nuclear power industry in the United States that basically killed the nuclear power industry in the United States because of that accident. And it created a major public mistrust that was aggravated by the Chernobyl accident. Dr. Kurikawa says that it was the mindset that led to the disaster at the Fukushima nuclear plant. Okay, now let's look at this Fukushima committee report, the one that I mentioned to you, that I was a member of that, and I worked on several parts of that. One section of that says, Fukushima Daiichi reaffirms the importance of people play and safety culture, and then recovery ultimately depends on the ingenuity of the people that work on these plants. And then we need to develop resilience, and we need to pay attention to the operators and designers that they do work on that. And this was a very important statement. Fukushima Daiichi accident reaffirmed that people are the last line of defense in a severe accident, because if you look at Fukushima Daiichi, it was the nuclear operators, Superintendent Masuda, that they stop a meltdown at Daiichi the same way that they had it in Daiichi. Of course, they were a little lucky, but if it was not because of Superintendent Masuda and his team at Fukushima Daiichi, it would have had also a triple meltdown. We try to explain that in our article. I have written a little piece for our university publication, and this is that photo that you saw that yours truly in Fukushima Daiichi. And in this piece, again, I made some observation, but in the interest of time, I go over that. And again, I reiterated the point that human operators, they constitute both the first and last layer of defense. in any type of a nuclear safety cases that we have. My final words and conclusion, I think, is a sober one, and I would like to leave it with you. That's what I said earlier. We need to always think about and think about. And what do I mean by thinking about and think about is the issue. I started by talking about the importance of safety culture. Safety culture was a problem in 3 Mile Island accident, was a major problem in 3 Mile Island accident that I mentioned to you. And this statement was mentioned about 3 Mile Island by either Presidential Commission or Congressional Commission. It's called Rugby Report. They say the principal deficiency in commercial nuclear reactor today, meaning 1975, it was not hardware, but there are management problem and again, the safety culture problems. Then there was another major chemical accident, Bhopal, which is not nuclear, but this is interesting. Dr. Valery Legazov, who investigated Chernobyl, he refers to this accident. And this is what Legazov has said when he went to investigate Chernobyl accident, that we should have learned from 3 Mile Island. He says that over here. He says that the accident that happened in Chernobyl was very much similar to the thing that happened in Bhopal, which was a chemical plant, and 3 Mile Island. But this is very interesting that the man who went and investigated Chernobyl, as you see in his statement over here, he refers that to this accident, which was a chemical plant, release of methyl isocyanate gas that killed 2,000 people in Bhopal, India on December 3rd, 1984, that he said that we should have learned from that. And now it's interesting, in 2011 in Fukushima, Dr. Kurikawa also, he says that we should have learned from this, from 3 Mile Island, we should have learned from Chernobyl, and for Chernobyl, Legazov says that we should have learned from Bhopal.
Thank you, Dr. Meshkati. We need to continue now with.
I'm almost done. I'm totally done. And basically, what I say in a next nuclear accident, hopefully it would not be. What will happen? Or we are gonna say there that we should have learned from this, and that. And we know that this is statement by.
Yes, we do. We quote that statement very often.
Yeah. And thank you very much for your attention. My email is there. If you have any question, please feel free to send me an email, and I will be happy to provide you with the copies of these articles. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Meshkati. And we will now continue on with Ms. Katerina Pavlova. Katerina, over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much for this opportunity to have time with you together. And Dr. Durberg, thank you for bringing Chernobyl informational issues on the international arena everywhere for years. The Chernobyl disaster contains many myths and many open questions. So it is at your annual conference and webinars that society and society get update about the latest regarding development of the exclusion zone and historical facts. I will share also with you some slides. As you all know, the Chernobyl disaster is a man-made environmental and humanitarian catastrophe caused by two thermal explosions and the destruction of the first power unit of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant on the night April 26, 1986. The destruction was explosive. The reactor was completely destroyed and a large amount of radioactive substance was released into the environment, namely strontium and uranium elements, into the air for 10 days. The catastrophe is considered to be the largest in the history of nuclear energy in terms of the number of victims, consequences, and economical losses. As a result, Chernobyl catastrophe, about 5 million were affected, and almost 5,000 settlements of the Republic of Belarus, Ukraine, and Russia Federation are located in the contaminated areas. In addition to Ukraine, the Republic of Belarus, and the Russia Federation, the territories of former SSSR is also contaminated, and also Sweden, Austria, Norway, Germany, Finland, Greece, Romania, Slovenia, Switzerland have been significantly polluted as a result of Chernobyl disaster. Of these 2,293 villages, towns, and cities in Ukraine, with a population of more than 2.5 million. Territory of 2,600 square kilometers, it's like 1,000 square miles, contaminated with uranium elements. 96 neighborhoods evacuated forever. 193,000 people resettled in obligatory order. Almost 500,000 liquidators engaged in the process of liquidation of disaster consequences. The cost of overcoming the consequences of the Chernobyl catastrophe were a heavy burden on the economy of the then USSR. Direct losses and cost from all sorts of financing related to the Chernobyl disaster estimate for the period from 1986 till 1989 amounted to approximately $12.5 billion US. According to the calculation of Ukrainian specialists, the total economic losses for Ukrainian amounted to at least $180 billion US, including the amount of indirect losses due to non-use of contaminated agricultural land, water, and forest sources, as well as the reduction of electricity production. Because of accident, Ukraine takes the second place in Europe and the first in the world by amount of radioactive waste it has. It is regard our state put an important role on our agency in long-term storage and disposal of radioactive waste. Talking about high-level coordination of our agency, it is important to note that we are coordinated by Cabinet of Ministers of Ukraine through the Minister of Ecology of Ukraine, who direct and conduct the agency activity. In Ukraine, State Agency of Exclusion Zone Management is a central exclusive body responsible for strategic direction as follows. Exclusion zone management, overcoming the consequences of Chernobyl accident, Chernobyl nuclear power plant decommissioning and transformation of the shelter object into an ecological safety system, state management of the area of radioactive waste management and the stage of the long-term storage and disposal. The Chernobyl exclusion zone in the area has been forbidden for free access and has been heavily contaminated by long-life radium plugs. As of today, the territory is divided into main parts. The 10-kilometer zone is a territory of special industrial use, specially created to place their facilities of renewable energy and storages for radioactive waste. And the 30-kilometer zone, whereby the degree of the president, Chernobyl radiation and ecological biosphere reserve was created. The territory of special industrial use, so-called 10-kilometer zone, which is around Chernobyl nuclear power plant, will enable use the highly contaminated territory to enhance the mechanism of radioactive waste management and create the opportunity for infrastructure. There is a number of facilities with this territory designed to store and process radioactive waste, Ukrainian radioactive waste. The creation in 1986 of the shelter object over the destroyed force power unit protected the environment from radiation. This shelter object has been performing its protective function for more than 30 years. So the decision was taken to build a new construction to protect people and environment for longer period, namely new safe confinement. As of today, the construction of new safe confinement, which is the biggest mobile in the world, is completed and moved about the first destroyed unit. The new safe confinement will serve for 100 years. Now I'm going to tell you more about 30-kilometer zone, which has renewed itself within 35 years period after Chernobyl disaster. Created within this 30 kilometers exclusion zone, the largest SURF in Ukraine is a basis for an extremely important and unique nature experiment, not only in our country, but also in the world. Despite the fact the exclusion zone has suffered incredible losses, now it is at the center of amazing animal and plant world. We can deny that nature is much more powerful even than such a terrible anthropogenic factor as a Chernobyl catastrophe. According to the scientists, there can be more than 400 species of animals, birds, fish, included the Red Book of Ukraine, that need our protection. To date, 300 species have already been identified. 66 species include the Red Book of Ukraine. More than 1,200 types of higher varco have been found. 61 species include the Red Book of Ukraine. From 2018, Chernobyl radiation and environmental biosphere reserve, and also our agency is stretching international cooperation. We have good relation if we implement so many international projects with IAEA, European Bank, NATO, and also our donors from all over the world, USA, United Kingdom, Sweden, and else. Also, one of opportunity we see in our territory is implementation and introduction of alternative energy project. It is the exclusion zone is considered a new stage in overcoming the consequences of the accident. Today in the Chernobyl zone, there are huge territories that are permanently removed from agricultural production. The infrastructure of power transmission lines is also very developed. It is extremely important for investors to make sure that the network connection will be provided. Starting from 2016, the Ministry of Ecology, together with our agency, carried out complex of measures aimed to increase and develop of green energy in exclusion zone. In October 2018, at the industrial site of Chernobyl NPP, official open ceremony of 1 megawatt solar power plant was created. Chernobyl is the first nuclear power plant in Ukraine, the first one which was commissioning and decommissioning. The first nuclear power plant where large-scale international projects are being implemented. Today, we are the first nuclear power plant on which site alternative energy is generated. I think it is very positive that the station again has electrical power and they give green energy. Our agency will continue to work on the transformation of Chernobyl from black point to green. Thank you so much, and I open for your questions and looking forward for very interesting discussion.
Thank you very much, Katerina, and thank you very much, Naj, for a brilliant presentation. And we will now follow up with questions. Comparing black point and white point, did the Chernobyl disaster affect the growth of cancer in humans? Now, before I turn it over to Professor Meshkati, I would like to mention to you that at a high-level meeting in 1996 between the World Health Organization and the International Atomic Energy Organization and European high-level participants, the finding was that although there were 30 deaths attributed to acute radiation overdose, 3 children died from the child thyroid cancer, but no other statistically significant deviation from the norm for any other cancers, including Fukushima in the Chernobyl region. The finding was also that basically the exposed population suffered dramatic problems with post-traumatic stress disorder, which was discussed at other conferences. Dr. Meshkati?
Thank you very much, Dr. Dubek. Thanks for the question. The issue of the cancer as a result of Chernobyl, that deals with the consequences of the accident rather than the root causes of the accident. That area is not an area of my research. I'm looking at the root causes and preventing the root causes. However, if I may say the following, that issue is, as Dr. Durbach mentioned, it's a very controversial issue. And I would like to refer you to 2 recent books on that. One of them is by Professor Kate Brown at MIT. It is, I have the book in my office. I don't have it here with me at home, but if you Google it, Kate Brown, K-A-T-E, and Brown, B-R-O-W-N. She's a professor of science history at MIT, and she published this book on the radiation effect of Chernobyl 2 years ago. There is also the book by my co-author, distinguished Professor Sergei Polokhy on Chernobyl. I think these 2 books, they may have some insights for you about the controversy and other issues, and they may have some useful, and of course, World Health Organization and International Atomic Energy Agency, they have also data that you can study. That's the best answer I could give to that very important, profound question.
Thank you, Professor Meshkati. What joint actions are Ukrainians and Japanese scientists taking to investigate and prevent new global catastrophes?
I can actually answer for this question. Our agency and exclusion zone and enterprises which is located in exclusion zone have very close cooperation with Fukushima University, and for last 5 years we have international project called SATREPS. In this project is include all kind of investigation and all kind of cooperation is sphere of learning, lessons learning from Chernobyl and Fukushima. So I do think that we're doing very much in this area, and we keep in touch, and we're so close with our partners, with our colleagues from Fukushima in the field of investigation and cooperation.
This is another question. I think either you, Katerina, or Professor Meshkati can answer that. The development of nuclear energy and any nuclear power, is that a time bomb? Are you for or against the operation of nuclear power plants? Professor Meshkati?
Thank you. This is again another very good question. I would say it depends. Nuclear energy could be a reliable and very stable source of baseload and energy if we run it correctly, if we have a strong safety culture. We have, for example, an example of France that has the highest electricity generation share from the 50 plus nuclear power plants, and not for wood, they have had good record. However, we have not so many good records in other countries. I think it's that every technology has its own risks. Nuclear has its own risk, but the fact of the matter is how we run it, how we operate it, and the safety culture in the regulator, in the utility, and in the operating companies. That's, I think, is the key.
Thank you, Professor Meshkati. Ms. Pavlova.
I want also mention that actually yesterday, during the visit of Director General of IAEA in Ukraine, one of the students of Kyiv Polytechnical Institute were actually asked the similar question. And Mr. Grossi, Director General, is mentioned that it is impossible human being without nuclear power. So that's why we should strengthen our cooperation between all countries with nuclear power to continue implement points to save and to build and to live in time when it's with power units of nuclear. So I do agree with Mr. Meshkati, Professor Meshkati, that safety culture, this is the most important, what we learned from in SAG1. And of course, in all stages of development of nuclear, we have risk, but we can't deny that we cannot have future without nuclear energy. So it's better to learn to save and safety culture. It's better to learn, increase our safety and security in power units, but we should live and implement project with regarding implementation and learn from a nuclear power in future.
Thank you, Ms. Pavlova. And Fred, do you have a question?
Yes, I have two questions that came in earlier before the webinar. So the first question is, I think, for both.
Just move on with the question, Fred.
And okay, what are the current consequences of the Fukushima tragedy? And what are the ways to solve this problem? What are the experts' predictions on this issue?
The current consequences of Fukushima tragedy is very much like the Chernobyl tragedy. It's the exclusion zone and the resettlement of all the people that have been evacuated. Something like 160,000 people have been evacuated from exclusion zone. And the exclusion zone is something like 20 kilometers. Radius with the center of the plant, circle with the center of a plant and radius of almost 20 kilometers. The other problem of the Fukushima tragedy, which fortunately we didn't have it at Chernobyl. In Chernobyl, we had the fuel-contained material, which is under the sarcophagus. But in Fukushima, we have over 1,200,000 tons of contaminated water that are stored in 5,000 storage tanks. And they want to gradually release that to the Pacific Ocean. It has caused problem in Korea and for China, for their local fishermen and others.
Thank you, Professor Meshkati. This is a question, Katerina, maybe you can answer that. Many countries store nuclear fuel in order to find a new benefit from it for the future. Can you comment on this?
Nuclear fuel, it is a really strategic product in our country. For example, if I comment regarding Ukraine, and spent nuclear fuel, this is a result what the product we have after the spend this fuel in the power unit. So I will answer next way that the most important issue in this regard, it is storage and reprocessing of this spent nuclear fuel, because spent nuclear fuel is radioactive waste, and all countries with nuclear power units should be very careful to provide strategy to management the spent nuclear fuel and radioactive waste. So I think in this regard, we should be very in very close cooperation with IAEA and international partners to have clean future. So this is my answer.
Thank you. Fred, do you have the other question?
Yes, the other questions is been answered during the presentation, but I'll just go ahead and ask it because it was sent before the presentation. What are the main reasons of such huge difference between Chernobyl and Fukushima?
I think the main reason, the commonalities I talk about that as far as the root causes of that, but there is also another important difference or thing which is going on over there is, of course, after the Chernobyl accident, toward a few years later, Soviet Union disintegrated. But in the case of Japan, the country is still there. And that's why the impact of the Fukushima accident on the energy strategy of Japan has been much more significant than the impact of the Chernobyl on former Soviet Union and the other newly independent republic. The other thing, as was in New York Times, there were a series of articles in last month about Japanese public strong mistrust of nuclear energy. And this is something that they could not easily overcome it.
Very good point. And this is this question sort of points to that. What joint actions are Ukrainian and Japanese scientists taking to investigate and prevent new global catastrophes? Ms. Pavlova, we'll start with you.
Actually, we cannot, our country is not able to make such investigation. It is just Japan have right on them territory make investigation, and we in our territory, and also it can be investigation from IAEA team. So I one more time want to mention that we can have cooperation just in regard on international projects, SATRIPs. It is cooperation with scientists to learn more and more about consequences and reason of catastrophe.
And Professor Meshkati?
There are collaboration at the level of the International Atomic Energy Agency through the nuclear safety sides of that. But I think this is something that I proposed before, that we need to somehow regionalize the collaboration of nuclear safety. For example, in the Persian Gulf region, Iran has a nuclear plant called Bushehr, and United Arab Emirates in Abu Dhabi Emirates, they are building 4 nuclear reactors in the Baraka site. I think their regional issues are much more important, and they need to come together to talk about this issue of nuclear safety more at the regional collaboration above and beyond this international multilateral collaboration.
Next question, I think, is something the both of you could have a perspective on. How effective is the sarcophagus over the fourth reactor in Chernobyl? Katerina, we'll start with you.
I probably will say about new safe confinement. It is a very unique, big, movable construction, and it is safe. In time when this new safe confinement was moved on the first unit, the radiation level is directly more less than before. So we can consider that this is very safe for 100 years. Will give us time to find more perspective what we do inside, because inside we have old reactor. We should now manage the project and make this reactor open it to manage all radioactive waste what it's include inside of this reactor.
Professor Meshkati?
I think Katerina is an expert on that issue, and I second whatever she said. The new safe shelter is perfect. However, the problem is that fuel-contained material, something 450 tons of that, which used to be under sarcophagus, is the old reactor with the material and the molten fuel. I have read a report that fuel could be vulnerable to causing, because of an earthquake or something, a critical mass and chain reaction. That's what I think the next stage is, to remove that fuel-contained material to a safe repository, which, by the way, Ukraine has signed that thing for interim spent fuel storage. Hopefully they can remove that debris to the safe repository.
Thank you, Professor Meshkati. And this question is for you, Ms. Pavlova. You mentioned recently that there was some toxic dump placed or deposited in the Chernobyl restricted zone. And this question is, what are the animals exposed to besides mutations? How do they survive, and how exactly can people help?
First of all, I would like to say that we have no mutants in the exclusion zone. Maybe it was some animals with some mutant things in 1986, but we know that nature is renew itself, and we never seen any mutants. I never seen any real picture of some mutants or some animals with 2 heads or 5 legs. So it is just myths we have. And Belfer Reserve is controlled and have some laboratory which control and investigate all these cases with animals, how they migrate, and how is being inside of reserve. So animals, it's perfect clean. Of course, some animals, if they going through the red forest, they can bring by hair or legs some radionuclides, but it's so little and it's not have any impact of animals. So no mutants.
Thank you, Ms. Pavlova. So we are basically pretty much at the end of our webinar. So Professor Meshkati, are there any last final words that you would like to leave with our audience, since many of them are students?
I would like to thank you and Catherine and World Information Transfer for giving me this opportunity. My best wishes for the students and the audience is, please try to read as much as they can, and always remember to think about unthinkable, and also be working to make sure that they keep the feet of the nuclear power industry and regulator to fire of improving their safety culture.
Ms. Pavlova?
I would like to say thank you for this evening, for the day on your side, and I would like to thank you for auditory, for our students that they interested about this issue. This is not just history, it's also some knowledge about all important stage of nuclear sphere. So I wish everybody health, and we continue our conversation. We open to more stretching knowledge and information exchange between all international society. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Well, I would like to thank both of you very, very much for brilliant presentations. Hopefully they gave a lot of food for thought to our audience. I would also like to thank Fred for managing the webinars as usual. And I would like to point out to you that our webinar on zoonotic diseases will be in May, and so will an update from Ambassador Sergeyev on the political ramifications of COVID. So again, thank you very, very much, and have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.